Banana slam jam.
Hello, everybody. Today I'm back, Coach BSJ, but I'm joined by a special guest. We got ourselves Khezu here. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing pretty great. Kind of looking forward to this, let's call it a session or whatever, quick analysis. And yeah, I
This
guess
is
we'll see how it goes.
this is a BSJ getting coached coaching session rather than the norm. So myself, I'm decently high MMR. I'm like rank 60 NA. I know that's like basically rank 1 EU,
Basically.
but I've heard that you're somewhere close to that. I have in my notes that you are rank 2 EU, but I just looked at the leaderboards and I saw 3. I don't know if Gamerzclass is like aware of this. Maybe you've been slacking a little bit. Do you have an explanation for that?
I think it's just a bug on the leaderboard. I'm actually, nah, just kidding. Well, we lost some games here and there. I got rank 1 like, what, a week ago. But after a lot of wins, there comes the classic state of time and place where you're just gonna lose a lot of games. Not saying it's only
So
my teammates' fault, but shit happens. That's fine.
hey, there's variation. You get dealt some
Yes.
bad hands, you get dealt some good hands. I usually just consider the teammates the cards. So my question would be yeah, everyone here is wondering, like, if you could give us a paragraph of what you think makes it possible for you to be such high MMR in such a competitive region, what would you tell us at home?
Um, well, I think you mean like so the different factors that like go into what could potentially make you get high MMR?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I think there's many different steps. I think first of all, it will come down to your understanding of Dota, which is gonna differ from patch to patch. Like which heroes are good, which heroes are bad, timings of heroes, stuff like this. Then it's gonna depend like on your hero pool. If you play like 100 different heroes and you're good at all of them, that's good. But if you can maybe like get really good at 5 of them, and then you have, I don't know, 20 you're good at, and then 50 mediocre, and then, maybe some heroes you can't play at all, that's fine. There are some heroes in Dota I can't play. It's probably only like 5 to 10, but still, the more you focus on like specific heroes and mastering them, that's definitely gonna help you get better. I think you can go over to like attitude and like mental state, keeping a clear mind, not tilting, trying to understand that. Or like an analogy I like to use or look at is that both teams have 5 players, which means you have 4 allies. Once you start flaming your teammates, you might suddenly not have 5 enemies, but you could make yourself a 6th one. So you don't really want to do that. You want to keep your allies on your side and not shove them over to the enemy. So I think
Yeah.
that's why it can be good to, of course, feelings will take over and we're all humans, so sometimes people are gonna flame or get angry. But you should try to keep it within acceptable parameter, perhaps.
I've got my own personal testimony for that. Recently, I've been trying to turn a new leaf with my approach,
Uh-huh.
attitude-wise, to pubs, and I've just noticed my teammates are better. Like, not like necessarily higher skilled, but
Yeah.
they like work with me better. And I'm just like, I don't think that's a coincidence, But I'll give my old self
Yeah.
a little bit of slack. But the my question to go off of that would be if teammates are like inconsistent. I think a lot of people would argue that how much control can you really have over your own MMR in such a team-based game?
Yeah.
And I would argue that if it's all about your own consistent input to the game, if you have higher impact than your respective counterpart on the opponent team, if you're the off lane, you have more impact than the off lane. If you're the 5, you have more impact than the off lane, or excuse me, the 5.
Yeah.
Then, like, would you agree to that sentiment that you just have to have more impact than the guy on the other team?
No, definitely. I mean, if you do that on average, then you're probably gonna win more than you lose. Because at the end of the day, if you keep complaining about your teammates, whether that's right or wrong, it's probably the same for the enemies. If you just go by, that's just logically what's supposed to happen. If there's that many bad players in your bracket, you're not the only one that's getting them in your team, realistically speaking. So if you can just do well yourself, and also at the end of the day, it's always better to look more at yourself and be aware of what you're doing than overly look at your teammates, because that's gonna, drift you off of your own game and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, kind of something I try to do, if I know something has to happen, I will maybe tell a guy once, and if he's not having it, he doesn't agree, he doesn't listen, whatever, fine. and I'll go back to focusing on my own game. Because there are definitely times where I sometimes look too much at my teammates because I know that something should happen, but it's not. But especially in those moments, I will start playing worse, 100%. If I overly focus on that, I will start playing bad myself. And then that actually makes me kind of angry, and in those games I will, lose way more than usual had I just focused on my own game.
Yeah, we have all been there. I've been learning this lesson a lot more so recently than ever in my career, and the biggest part for me has been that if you focus on anything that isn't what you're doing next, and maybe like what your teammates are doing to affect that, is it making you have to play more passively?
Yep.
Is it making you have to wait for that next item? Do you have to maybe play a different part of the map? Other than what they're doing to affect your next move, anything else you focus on is like just a distraction, as you said. It just makes you play worse, makes you lose games you probably should have won. And a lot of the times, I've noticed that when it comes to teammates, is that if they make a mistake, it's our job to just not compound it, right?
Yeah.
Is that are these like lessons? When would you say you learned these things? Because I feel like I'm like behind the loop when it comes to these high MMR players, these competitive level players.
I mean, I think it's like random. Like, I think for different people, some of these are like natural, right? Maybe because they can relate to like real life situations or whatever. But anyway, I think just like over time, I think some of these I knew like years ago because I played Han, which is basically like same game, just that it looks different. But it's also, I mean, I think it just depends. Like, also, if you play in a real team, in like a team environment, I think you learn to understand that, generally speaking, everyone wants to win and everyone is trying their best. So instead of like pushing them down when they're already having a hard time, you should like try to encourage them. Maybe you can try like this one step more, or maybe that something specific can happen that will like bring them back in the game. Like maybe you can alert them for a smoke and stuff like that. But I would say you just learn these things like slowly over time. Like eventually it either makes sense, or maybe you win a game because you were like, wow, I was so PMA this game. Had I played this game yesterday, I would have like broke my items or yelled at this guy. But instead of yelling at this guy, he made a comeback. Punched it the next 25 hooks, fucking dandy face, and then you just won the game. But you never know. You need to start somewhere and like I guess try to learn. But I think it just comes like with time and trying to understand. I don't know. I guess humans and everybody makes mistakes. Everyone watching will also make mistakes.
Yeah, going off of what you just said about teammates and everything, I think there's two situations we find ourselves in games where when you get frustrated. And one of them is where you're super powerful and you can't get your teams to play around you the way you want. And the other ones are where you're like super weak and you kind of like need somebody else on the team to do something and you don't and you just have to wait. And
Yep.
until they choose to do whatever their powerful hero is supposed to do, you can't really do anything. So like do you have like an approach to those type of situations differently, or do you kind of just view them through the same lens of your own game?
Let me see. I don't know if I view them differently. I just know that if I'm strong, that if we just pretend that I'm like the strongest hero on the map right now, I will try to tell my teammates that I will literally say, I am the strongest hero. I want to do this. We're strong enough. If we do this, like, we will win. We're gonna kill them. You guys will get gold, whatever. If they don't listen, I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna make them do it. I'll probably like buy a smoke, ping it, and try to tell them this is what we have to do. Or, maybe I'll like go the next step. I will go towards the area that I'm talking about, even though they're not coming. And I will check if now they follow. Like once they see, oh god, this mega farm guy is going here, if I don't follow him now, we might lose. I sometimes do that too, like, even though they're not responding, I will like posture towards the area and see if they're following. And if they're really not coming, then I'll be like, okay, whatever. Then maybe I back. But if I'm the weak guy and I need someone else to do something, and they don't do it, the hell do I do? I mean,
it's about patience at that point, right? That's the only answer I've ever come
Yeah,
up
I
with.
mean, sometimes I think you'll just have to accept it, right? Like they're responsible for their game. You do not control their hero. So if you tell someone to do something and they don't do it, I mean, I think you just have to just find the next play, right? Like Dota is a very complex game, very open game. There's so many different moves. Like just because this certain thing doesn't happen that you think should, doesn't mean like the game's over, right? Like the game goes on. Maybe fine, lane for 1 more minute, even though you're not having a good lane. Or maybe you can TP safe lane. I think at the end of the day, you just need to be I think you just need to be open and creative when it comes to Dota. Whether you're strong, whether you're weak. I think especially when you're weak, you need to be creative to do things that other people don't. I think there's some people that are really good at that, like not necessarily only when they're weak, but I think like Thompson plays a very unique style of mid that hasn't really been done much before. So that just goes to show you that Dota is very open. You can do many things. And just because you don't do what's meta doesn't necessarily mean it's bad.
As long as you do it better than the other guy. It doesn't, like, objectively speaking, you have more impact, even if you do it a little wonky. Exactly, yeah. So let's not spend too much time introducing ourselves. We could probably theory craft pub Dota all day, but to wrap it up before we get into our replay, yeah, as an offlaner, what would you say are like the 3 things you do that make you such a high MMR offlaner that no other offlaners are doing? Or at least most other offlaners are not.
Yeah, well, so I think offlane is obviously like a very weird kind of role. I also think a lot of people don't really understand it. I think generally what you want to do is that, well, you always want to have your best game possible. But in the offlane, if you can have a good game while shutting down the enemy carry, I think that's good. I think something that I do very well is identify like my lane. What do I need? What does my enemy need? And so if I can identify that they need, let's say they need to push and pull in the lane, they need the hard cam, for instance. It means that I need it blocked, so I will communicate that, for instance, with my support. Or I think I understand hero matchups very well, that maybe some other offlaners don't. Maybe I'm one step ahead of the meta, and I know all the good offlane meta heroes. Like I think Death Prophet is really good, and I've been playing that for months, and now it's like catching on. Or like I play a lot of Pangolier.
I remember seeing you playing that way back, and suddenly it's everywhere.
Yeah. I even like played it 5 for a while. I think it's just like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you play meta heroes. I think once you figure out heroes that work for you, which is what I think happened to me when like the patch came out, whenever it was, December maybe, that one. I just think I figured out some heroes, yeah, and I just, it doesn't, at the end of the day, or something that I say is that you don't need to buy the perfect items, and you don't need to play the perfect hero. If you know your purpose, and you know what you have to do, and then you buy items to execute this game plan, then I think you can go so many different item builds in Dota. Like if you know they have 3 physical cores, and then that's the reason why you buy Crimson Guard and AC or whatever on your offlane, because they have Monkey King, PA, and I don't know, Legion Commander offlane, then that's a really good item build on nearly any given Dota hero. And if that's why you buy it, then it makes sense, and then it's probably a good build.
Yeah, pretty much if you can explain your items, I would say that's like the hardest part about offlane, is because usually it's like a grand plan of the game. You're not necessarily saying, what can I do to carry this game? You're like, what can I do to make my team stronger than their team? But with that in mind, I'm looking forward to seeing all of that in action, as I think it's about time we pull up the replay. You want to introduce us on the overall idea of why you chose the game we're going to be watching today?
Yeah, sure. Let me go over real quick. So, the reason why we're going to be looking at this replay is that, so we wanted to look at a replay that was, not super easy from my side. You don't want to just look at a stomp or a game where every lane is winning, because everyone can play that. I also think Puck is a kind of interesting hero from the offlane, and the game became pretty hard. It was very throwy at one point also from their side, so I think there's a lot to look at. And
spoilers.
Yep, some spoilers, but other than that, I think there's a lot like within the laning stage and what to do like in the mid game, and maybe what's important to look at early on. And I also think some touches on item builds here and there I think can be pretty important. So as we get into the game, I need to double check real quick when I pick the hero, because then I can give some more context. Nope, that's one step too far. Let's see. I think I picked second phase. Hopefully this is gonna work.
It's a little wonky sometimes when you usually have to, you have to load the game and then rewind it. It's usually what you have to do.
Let's see. Let's make sure I don't go back too far. Yes, I haven't picked yet. So we have... Nope, I have picked.
It looks like you absolutely first picked.
I think I picked second phase.
Oh, okay.
Let's try one more time.
So,
it's too far.
Yeah, it's a little wonky, guys, with the Dota replays I've dealt with all this random crap before.
Okay, so anyway, I think I picked second phase. I'm pretty sure I know that he first picked Grim, So I know that they have like these two spellcasters, and I know that Puck can like kind of go two ways with like these lions and rastas. Some people think they're counters, but I think it goes both ways. If you catch them first, they hate it and they will die. If they catch you first, then well, same thing happens to you, but you should be able to play around it. But I think like the main point here was that I have a Tusk 4. Generally, if you have these melee 4s, you want to pick a hero that can either A, pressure the lane with them, which are, in my opinion, generally the range heroes, or you want to pick offlaners that are self-sustainable, maybe an Enigma, a Timbersaw, because that would allow my Tusk to like run around the map and, you know, get the enemies killed. And then my safe lane is Bloodseeker Caudal. I think Coil is really good with these two heroes, so I just want to like have some lockdown and potentially synergize nicely with my Tusk in this game.
I think at the simplest level, I saw this pick, and I see a lot of like I'll give an example of like a bad safe lane I'll lane against is like Undying Jug. You know, they have a melee 5 position who has no stun or slow, and that's exactly what Jug is. And so I've noticed that in general, like good laning duos are ones that don't really have much in common. I think Puck's like main weakness early. I don't play too much Puck,
Yep.
but is that she generally lacks a bit of damage. Like she wants somebody to make her a threat, right? So Tusk for me synergizes really well with that because of the tag team. Is that like? Do you think Puck like works with pretty much every melee 4? Like, would it be good with a Shaker too, or do you think that that damage component of Tusk is like a super important?
It works with Shaker too. I think it's better with heroes that can also like Shaker likes to play more like behind you, or like you know he doesn't really go in so much. Since Puck has like kind of low armor and low move speed, you don't really want to be the first target for the enemies in the lane, which is why I think it's better with heroes such as Tusk, maybe Spellbreaker. I think Earth Spirit is also better than Earthshaker, simply because you know they go in a little more for you. And like you said, I think damage is also lacking with Puck. Like his spells don't do that much early on. One of the strengths though with this hero, with Puck and also other heroes like Pangolier, is that if your support is fighting out here, you can orb to them pretty quickly and like try to help them. In this case, I was telling my guy to pull the second wave because I think it's good. If the Lich doesn't, if the Lich isn't on me, I like that. So in that sense, I would like my Tusk to pull this wave to make the Lich like decide to follow him or go on me. Sadly, that didn't happen, but you know that's still okay. And here I ping this guy because I feel like he's out of position, so my Tusk can like run over. We don't end up killing him, but the way you win lanes is not necessarily only by killing. There's like, you can view it as like small wins here and there. Every time you make them use consumables, or you take good trades, that is a small win. You know, it might make you win next time. For instance, here again, we nearly get to kill him this time, because we harassed him earlier. And
Yeah, what I saw in this game, I've never actually seen Puck Tusk in a lane duo, is that I've seen Pango Tusk be, like you mentioned Pango, it's funny you mentioned that, because I've seen Pango Tusk be a really strong lane duo. Like, even just people can notice that the way Tusk plays is on the right side of the lane consistently, and you want to be an offlaner that can join him there, right? Like, that's the best part that I saw. How many times throughout the course of this lane that Tusk is engaging the Lich here, and you just use an orb to get a CS and then join him on the fight. And I think that that was like an oversight by me that like I wouldn't have thought about when I looked at the matchup. But it's something that when people watch lanes, it really is amazing how you can't just look at the abilities of the heroes. You look at how they play. Like, what area of the lane do they like to play? What do they need to enable them to do that? And I'm like, this is a perfect example right here.
Yeah.
Tusk is engaging. If you're a hero that can't move over there that quickly before the Ursa, that's not like a first blood. That's not a beneficial trade to you. So I really like
the Tusk would actually, like, instead of, if we like rewind this real quick, instead of the Tusk being able to do, if I'm any other hero that can't help him, he's not able to run back in here. The Lich would just make him like run away, right? But he knows that I can come, so this actually allows him to like bait the Lich in and like do this move. Because like you said, it's not only like important what spells the heroes have. I think it can be very important, like I mentioned before as well with the pulls. You know, some heroes rely on pulls, some heroes rely on playing on the side. A lot of these range 5s, they will like play out here, maybe check their pull real quick, or maybe they need to block this camp. And that's when him and me, like, we can use our heroes together and try to punish him, which we did. And it maybe didn't happen the first 2 times, but now the 3rd time it ends up being a kill, which is great for us.
So my question then is, if somebody's watching this and they're like, yeah, I picked Puck in my game, I had a 4-position Tusk, and the guy just played really passive. You know, he didn't do any of the stuff that we're seeing in your replay. Like, how would you adjust to that sort of thing?
Well, I think if you know that he can do something, you can maybe try to tell them. And I know that doesn't always mean that it's gonna happen afterwards. I just think it means that you have to adjust to your teammate. You know, if you can tell him something and then he does the right thing, that's great. Because then that means you can play the lane properly. But let's say he just plays in the lane with me and like sits behind me or sits next to me. Well, sometimes that's gonna be live. Maybe then we can push the lane and pull, or you know, whatever. Then I'll have to accept the situation and we'll just have to fight the Ursa. If Ursa runs in, I'll hit him, and hopefully eventually the Tusk will wake up and, you know, either help me or use some spells. But sometimes you can't control your teammates, right? I think you can only try to make the best of it.
What's your opinion on this bottle thing in the off lane? I think a lot of people, this is new to them. I don't think this bottle meta has really been a thing until like the last 6 months or so.
Well, personally, I think Bottle is really good because if you don't buy a sustain item on offlaners, you generally end up spending a lot of gold on it. You know, like Tango, Salve, Mangos. And they have like, Lich is one of the prime heroes that will just, you know, keep harassing you. Which is also one of the reasons, if I lane against Disruptor or Lich, I make sure that me or my 4 have a Salve when the lane starts. In this game, because it's a pub game, I bought a Salve myself, because I don't know if he's gonna buy one, or if he's gonna listen to me. And second of all, I think it's great in these lanes where you know you're gonna trade a lot. Like we're Puck Tusk, we wanna fight all the time. And if we take a 1-for-1 trade, it's great, because if he dies, he can respawn, refill my bottle. If I die, I can just TP in and bottle him like 2-3 times as well. So that's really good for us.
I've noticed it was really nice on heroes like Darkseer as well. And so that's a really good point you bring up. And I want the emphasis that I've learned when I was playing a lot of offlane myself and when I've gotten better at itemization, that rather than objectively looking at this bottle gives X amount of mana and X amount of health, like what is the type of lane that this item works in? And that's exactly what I saw with Darkseer lanes, right? It's the same idea. There's a lot of times where Darkseer lanes will have like a heavy 2v2 where everyone's taking a bunch of damage. One guy dies to the Ion Shell and either the 4 or the 3 dies. Exactly what you just said happens, right? You reset the lane by either you TPing back in with the bottle or him refilling yours. And if it's a lane where there's not all that much confrontation or there's kind of just a little bit of back and forth poking, it seems like bottle would be relatively underwhelming.
No, definitely. Like, I think Bottle is best in lanes. Like, first of all, people shouldn't just look at Bottle like, oh, it gives me 3 bottle charges. I could have bought 6 salves instead. Like, the thing is, first of all, this item never goes away, right? You keep it throughout the whole game. You can bottle up runes. You can refill. It's good against sustain lanes, and when you fight, which, as we've touched on many times, this is a great lane for it. And second of all, I think we have more wave clear than the enemies, which means we can probably refill our bottle on the bounties as well. And actually, another side note as well, or like a bonus point on top, is that we have Bloodseeker in our game, and he loves when his other lanes are fighting a lot, because then this happens. He runs around with like 500 movement speed, because there's this Ursa, you know, running back to base. But here am I. I'm a happy boy. Tusk gets to decide, you know. I don't need him to refill, so he doesn't have to come top. He just goes mid. He can go do his own thing, which is great for him as well.
If you liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that shenanigans, because at the end of the day, YouTube does care about that. You may not care about it, I may not care about it, but the YouTube algorithm does. So please do.